You checked the number this morning, and it wasn't what it should have been. It wasn't what you earned. You went to bed at a reasonable hour. You didn't eat anything you weren't supposed to eat. You took your medication. You did everything the appointment said to do, and the machine gave you the same number it gave you last week and the week before that. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from that moment, not the physical kind, the kind that comes from trying, really trying, and watching it not be enough, from following every instruction and standing in the morning light wondering what you're missing. I'm 83. I check my number in the morning and I recognize it. It moves the way I expect it to move. I sleep through the night most nights. I wake up with something that feels like a head start on the day, not a deficit to climb out of. And the one thing I eat before bed, something I'm going to name in this video, is part of why. What I'm going to tell you today connects two things that nobody in a standard appointment connects: your sleep and your fasting number. Not vaguely, not as a general wellness suggestion, mechanically, specifically, with a biological chain of events that runs from the moment you close your eyes to the number on that machine at 6 in the morning. And I'm going to name the food, one food, something you can find at any grocery store, something that costs about the same as a cup of coffee. And I'm going to tell you why your doctor probably hasn't mentioned it, not because it doesn't work, but because the connection between this food, your sleep, and your morning glucose is the kind of thing that takes longer than an 8-minute appointment to explain properly. Stay with me all the way through, because the mechanism is the thing. And once you understand the mechanism, the food makes complete sense. Her name was Frances, 78 years old, retired school teacher from a mid-sized city in North Carolina, 16 years with a type 2 diagnosis, the kind of patient who shows up to every appointment prepared, questions written down, numbers logged, a notebook she kept in her purse. She had been managing carefully, eating the right things, taking her medication without fail, and her fasting glucose every morning sat between 147 and 163. Every morning, steady as a wall. Her doctor was thorough. He checked her A1C regularly. He adjusted her medication when the numbers suggested it. What he never asked about was her sleep. Not once in 16 years had anyone sat in that room with Frances and asked, "How are you sleeping? How many times do you wake up? Do you feel rested in the morning?" Because the questions seemed separate. Sleep was sleep. Blood sugar was blood sugar. They lived in different parts of the chart. They don't live in different parts of the body. Here's the chain. Follow it carefully because every link matters. Your body has a cortisol rhythm. Cortisol is the hormone your biology uses to prepare you for waking. It rises in the early morning hours, gives your liver a signal, and that liver signal triggers the release of stored glucose into your bloodstream. This is the dawn phenomenon. This is why fasting glucose can be elevated even before you've eaten a single thing. Research has described how the liver releases stored glucose in the early morning hours, driven by hormones that rise as your body prepares for the day. In a body with insulin resistance, the cells don't respond cleanly to the insulin that follows, and the glucose from that liver release sits longer than it should. Now, what happens to that cortisol rhythm when sleep is disrupted? When you wake at 2 in the morning and lie there for 40 minutes? When you sleep lightly, restlessly, never quite reaching the deeper stages? Research has documented that a single night of disrupted sleep, not a pattern, one night, can increase insulin resistance the following morning by a significant margin. But the mechanism goes deeper than that. When sleep is fragmented, cortisol doesn't just rise earlier. It rises higher. It stays elevated longer. The liver reads a larger signal. It releases more glucose. And the number on that machine in the morning is partly a record, a direct biological record of how well or how poorly you slept the night before. Frances wasn't sleeping well. She hadn't been sleeping well for years. She woke up regularly between 2 and 3 in the morning and couldn't explain why. She'd accepted it as part of getting older, part of the deal. And every morning her fasting glucose reflected in part what her cortisol had done while she lay in the dark trying to fall back asleep. Nobody connected these two things for her. Not because the connection doesn't exist, because making it requires a conversation that takes longer than the appointments allowed. The question that changes everything is not, what are you eating? The question is, how deeply are you sleeping? Because deep, consistent sleep keeps cortisol quiet, And quiet cortisol means a liver that releases glucose moderately instead of aggressively, and a moderate liver release means a lower fasting number. The blood sugar problem and the sleep problem are the same problem, wearing two different faces. And here's what nobody asks at the pharmacy counter, at the appointment, in the pamphlets about healthy eating. Is there something you can eat before bed that supports the chemistry your brain uses to sleep deeply? Something real, whole, inexpensive, that works on the pathway between food and sleep and cortisol and that morning number? There is, and almost nobody mentions it. Drop your fasting number in the comments, and if your sleep has been poor for years, tell me that too, because I want to see how many people are carrying both without knowing they're connected. You do everything right. You eat clean, you take your pills, and the next morning that number is still too high. I know that frustration. I lived it for years. They never tell you about the morning rise, your sugar climbing while you sleep, no matter what you did the day before. You wake up, you test, and it feels like the work didn't count, like you're stuck depending on more and getting nowhere. I was done feeling powerless. I didn't want to throw out my doctor's plan. I wanted something natural and simple I could add to it, something that finally moved that morning number. I'll walk you through what changed it for me. And the natural support I add every day is in the free presentation linked below. The food is kiwi, 2 of them, eaten about an hour before sleep. Not a supplement, not an extract. The whole fruit with its skin removed, eaten as the last food before bed. 2 kiwis, every night. Research has shown that eating 2 kiwis about an hour before sleep consistently over several weeks was associated with falling asleep faster, sleeping longer, and waking less during the night. The researchers pointed to natural compounds in kiwi that support the chemistry your brain uses to move into deep sleep. Kiwi is one of the most concentrated whole food sources of vitamin C available. It contains folate. It contains small amounts of serotonin, and it contains antioxidants that research has associated with reduced oxidative stress, a factor that independently affects how well insulin receptors function. The chemistry behind it involves compounds in kiwi that support the pathway your brain uses to produce the hormones of sleep, the same hormones that, when they work properly, keep cortisol quiet through the night and let the liver do its job without overreacting. Better sleep, lower cortisol curve, more moderate liver release, lower fasting number. That is the chain. Each link is real. And then there is a second pathway, working at the same time. Research has pointed to an association between vitamin C and improved blood sugar response in people managing type 2 diabetes. Kiwi happens to deliver a meaningful dose of vitamin C as a whole food, not as a megadose supplement, but as the kind of concentrated natural source that works alongside the other compounds in the fruit. 2 mechanisms, 1 food, 1 hour before bed. Now, before you think it, yes, kiwi contains natural sugar. The question is whether it spikes blood sugar the way other sweet foods do. Research has classified kiwi as a low to moderate glycemic food. The fiber and water content of the whole fruit moderate how that sugar enters the blood. The key is eating it whole, not juiced, not blended into something else. The whole fruit. The fiber is the protection. Check with your doctor before adding anything new to your evening routine, especially if you're adjusting what you eat around medication timing. But for most people managing blood sugar, 2 kiwis before bed is a conversation that takes 30 seconds and meets no objection. Frances started eating 2 kiwis an hour before bed on a Tuesday. She was doubtful. 16 years of careful management had made her cautious about anything that sounded too simple. By the end of the second week, she noticed she was waking less. By week 4, she was sleeping through most nights for the first time in years. At week 6, her fasting glucose had come down to 128, down from 155. Same medication, same endocrinologist. 2 kiwis and a better night's sleep. Her doctor, at her next appointment, looked at the numbers and asked what had changed. She told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Keep doing it." The kiwi addresses the sleep cortisol glucose chain directly, but the overnight window responds to more than one intervention. And if other factors are still feeding the cortisol spike or the liver release, the kiwi works harder than it needs to. I go to bed at the same time every night. My room is cool and dark. I don't eat fast carbohydrates alone in the last hour before sleep. I've built the evening around what I know about what happens between midnight and 6 in the morning, not because it's complicated, because once you understand the chain, the habits make sense on their own. The first supporting habit is bedroom temperature. A cool room between 65 and 68 degrees has been shown to support the deeper stages of sleep where your body does its most important repair work and where cortisol stays quiet. Above 70 degrees, time in deep sleep decreases. A programmable thermostat set to cool the room by 9 in the evening is one of the highest return changes you can make for your fasting number. It costs nothing to adjust. The second is a consistent bedtime, the same time every night, not a range, a time. Your cortisol rhythm is partly governed by your circadian clock. A stable clock means a predictable, moderate cortisol rise. An irregular schedule means a larger, earlier, less controlled spike. Your fasting number on Monday after an inconsistent weekend is not random. It is a record of when your cortisol rose and how high it went. The third is what you eat in the last hour before sleep. A fast carbohydrate eaten alone, crackers, toast, sweet fruit without protein, produces a glucose rise that persists 2 to 3 hours into the night. That glucose adds to the load the liver is already managing in the dawn window. If you're hungry in the evening, a small portion of protein, a handful of walnuts, half a cup of cottage cheese, satisfies without spiking. The fourth is protein at breakfast, eaten before carbohydrate. It triggers a hormone your gut produces naturally that helps slow glucose into your blood and supports the pancreas in responding at the right moment. The kiwi works overnight. The breakfast protein carries the lower glucose pattern into the morning. 2 kiwis before bed. A cool room, a consistent bedtime, no fast carb alone before sleep. Protein first at breakfast. These 5 habits form a chain that runs from 9 in the evening to 9 the next morning. Each one works on a different link in the same biological sequence. Together, they change what the machine shows you when you press your finger to it at 6 in the morning. I want to say something to you directly before this ends. You've been asking the right questions for a long time. Watching the number, taking the medication, going to the appointments, sitting in those waiting rooms with your list of questions, and leaving with adjustments that didn't quite answer what you came in asking. And if you felt at times that the system wasn't built to explain things at the level you needed, that the appointments were too short, the answers too general, the gap between what you were told and what you were experiencing too wide to bridge in 8 minutes, you were right. That gap is real. It's not that anyone was hiding something. It's that the connection between your sleep and your fasting number, the cortisol chain I described today, takes longer than a standard appointment to explain. And in a system built for adjustments, not for mechanisms, the mechanism gets left out. But you have it now, and with it, something more valuable than an adjustment. A reason. A biological reason for what the number does and what you can do about it in the hours nobody was watching. I know this number has cost you more than just the readings on a machine. The careful planning before every meal in company, the hesitation before saying yes to a trip, a visit, a weekend with the people you love, wondering whether your energy will hold, whether you'll feel like yourself, whether you'll need to explain yourself instead of just being there. The quiet fear of becoming someone people have to plan around rather than someone who just shows up. The distance that puts between you and the life you still want to be living. That distance is not permanent. The chain I described today responds. Sleep improves, cortisol quiets, the liver releases less, the number comes down. And when the number comes down, the mornings open up. And the mornings are where the rest begins. The energy, the presence, the plans, the people. It is not too late for that. The body is still listening. You are not out of time. If you watched this whole thing, you're not the type who gives up. You're the type who keeps looking for a real answer. So let me be straight with you. The morning number isn't your fault, and it isn't just diabetes. It's the dawn rise, and it responds to the right daily habits. The goal was never to quit your treatment. It was to support it naturally so you finally see that number move and feel in control again. Alongside the steps I showed you, I take a simple, natural support every day to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range. Affordable, easy, and it works with my doctor's plan, not against it. The free presentation is in the description below. Go see it for yourself. And keep your doctor in the loop. This is support, not a replacement. Subscribe. There's more coming that connects the dots your appointments left open.